Welcome along to another edition of Shootout on the Zone, where each week, of course, we debate soccer's big talking points. With me, as always, to do just that, live in Toronto, is the one and only Greg Brady, who I'm no doubt has been counting the days till the Premier League's back.
Well, we're getting going. We're getting closer to Saturday. We got a Merseyside derby with top of the table Everton. What's up with that? I mean, we knew they'd be better, but we're going to find out this weekend against Liverpool just how much better they are. And yeah, Champions League draw as well. That got a lot of people's adrenaline flowing across Canada, I can tell you that.
And don't forget, of course, all those Champions League games once again for you on the Zone. So first up this week on Shootout, quite simply, who is going to win the UEFA Champions League? Obviously, Greg is going to say Paris Saint-Germain because of his love of the French last season, though I don't really need to ask the question, do I?
I'm gonna take you for a left turn, a sharp left turn in our automobile, Steve. I think PSG will be excellent, but I don't see them getting back, probably even to the semifinals. I don't have them in my Final Four. They kind of caught fire last year, didn't have League One to worry about, and were able to focus in. And remember, they saved themselves from death's door against Atalanta. Look, there's only been one squad repeat as Champions League champions since 1990, and that's really hard to believe, and it's been Real Madrid. I've got Real Madrid going far, but I think we get another repeat champion this time round in Bayern Munich, and I'll explain why in a minute. Who do you fancy?
Well, first of all, I'd like to point out that rarely do we agree on things, and I always try and find a case to disagree with Greg Brady, because that's part of the fun here on Shootout. So I've been sitting down today, going through Manchester City. Haven't recruited strong enough. Going through Liverpool. Could, but will they get to a third final in 4 seasons? That's a big ask. And I still think deep down, if you ask Jurgen Klopp, if it comes to it, he'd rather retain the Premier League. Barcelona, a club in turmoil. Yes, they've got Messi, but with Ronald Koeman, can't see them winning it. Juve, with Pirlo in charge, even though he's got Ronaldo, his first ever season as a manager, can't see them winning it. You're right about Real Madrid. They have quality. They have Zidane who does it. But there's something about Real Madrid at the moment that doesn't quite click. So all avenues, I'm afraid, point to agreeing with you, which is astonishing on Shootout. But Bayern are Bayern. And yes, they've lost Thiago, but they've gained Leroy Sané and 3 or 4 other additions as well. I just think they're winners, Greg. I agree with you. And of course, the left back isn't bad either, is he?
No, not in the least. And we get Alphonso Davies back in Champions League next week on DAZN, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. And not an easy match out of the gate. But here's what I see with Real Madrid. And I actually think Real Madrid is maybe the biggest threat because they're so under the radar right now to Bayern Munich. That'd be a final that, let's face it, we'd all get excited about. Pretty mouth-watering Champions League final in Turkey next spring. But Real Madrid started really well. 3 straight wins out of the gate. And they feel like, Steve, they're keeping their powder dry on the transfer market for going into next season. The idea of adding an Mbappe from Paris Saint-Germain or even being in the mix for players equally big. So the money they haven't spent now, they certainly could address that in January. But I think we're all sleeping on them. Luka Modric, Steve, I mean, who doesn't love this guy? He's 35, and he's a player that clearly is playing with passion, wants to stay and finish his career at Real Madrid. So I'm curious to see what Zidane does. You mentioned Liverpool, the difficulty in getting to 4 or 5 finals. Well, Real Madrid's been out of the final 2 years straight, and it probably doesn't sit very well with the club, with Zidane, or with their fan base. I think they're the biggest threat to Bayern Munich winning a back-to-back title.
Interesting. Well, we're all excited before the Champions League begins. So I thought this week on Shootout, as well as you and I, we'd get more of an expert opinion. Somebody who played in 17 Champions League seasons. And of course, he won it in 2008. It is Paul Scholes.
Who do you fancy for the Champions League this season?
It's difficult. I thought last year was really difficult to pick. Bayern Munich again could go on and win it. It's very difficult to go on and win it again, I suppose. But I think probably the usual suspects. I think Liverpool will be close. I'm not sure if City have improved enough to do it. But then you look at your Real Madrid, Barcelona, you can never rule these teams out.
So there you go. Just occasionally you and I know what we're talking about because Paul Scholes has gone for Bayern as well. But what I thought he was really interesting when he was speaking to me there, Greg, he didn't think City. He didn't think they recruited strongly enough to launch a Champions League successful campaign this year. Now, you've got to head City for the Premier League. I've gone Liverpool. So if you're going for them for the Premier League, why aren't you going for them for the Champions League?
Yeah, there just seems to be that mental block or an emotional block when it comes to Europe for Manchester City. And I think even their most ardent supporters are looking at them saying, we can't figure this out. We can't figure out why we can win Premier League titles. We can't figure out why we can, break records for goal scoring and why we've been so successful domestically. And Europe has been a big problem. You documented it back last summer. When was Pep Guardiola, with that talent, with that squad, ever going to have a better opportunity to, if not win, take City a lot further than he ended up taking them? So I think Liverpool may be more well-built for a European run. I've got them going to the semifinals along with Juventus, and falling short to either Bayern Munich or Real Madrid, whichever way the draw goes. But I worry about City. I think they can't get out of their own way when it comes to Europe. And it's one of those things you just have to see to believe sometimes in football.
It'll be interesting to see how that goes with Pep Guardiola this season. And then if we, as expect, there is another disappointment at the end of it, the consequences of it. Now, they play Porto match day one. Also, I'm looking forward to seeing the Europa League winners, Sevilla. They are at Stamford Bridge against Chelsea. And Ajax Liverpool stands out off the page for the Premier League champions to get back into Europe. And a couple of great other games as well on match day one, Greg.
Man United, I mentioned off the top, go right up against Paris Saint-Germain on that same Tuesday. They might have the toughest group, to be honest. Leipzig in that group is going to cause a lot of problems. They've been a team that's getting better and better. Leipzig's a real threat to cause some problems in Group H.
Yeah, and of course, we talked about Bayern. We tipped Bayern. We're talking about Alphonso Davies as well. They are back. What a game for them to start back up with. At home to Diego Simeone's Atletico Madrid, Luis Suarez and all.
That's going to be fascinating. I mean, Bayern, like I said, Bayern brought that depth, but all the stars are back anyway. Davies, Lewandowski, Muller. This feels like it's Bayern's competition to win or lose out of the gate.
So many questions that will be answered as the Champions League returns. And a reminder, as if you needed it, you can see every second on DAZN. Next up on Shootout, will Cavani be at Manchester United, a Falcao or a Zlatan? And that means a flop like Falcao or a success like Zlatan Ibrahimovic. What do you think, Greg?
Leaning more towards Falcao. So, I don't want to sit on the fence and say somewhere in the middle, but I feel like this signing it reeks of a little bit of desperation. It's not a reflection on the player's career. It's more a reflection that the player has had his best days in the rearview mirror. What's your thought?
Well, obviously, I'm not going to sit here and say he was Manchester United's number one target when the transfer window opened. But I don't think Zlatan Ibrahimovic was either back in the day. And people forget, if it wasn't for that serious knee injury for Zlatan Ibrahimovic, then he would have gone on at least another 12, 18, maybe 24 months at Manchester United. I also know and saw the effect that Zlatan, the ultimate pro, had on some of those younger players as well. And I'm confident that given a clear run of injury and illness, that Edinson Cavani can do the same. And let me tell you why, Greg, because when you look at his stats, quite simply, Manchester United have got a born goal scorer. He has scored goals wherever he's been. In fact, if you go back to 2007, he made his debut in Europe for Palermo in Italy. Since that day, only Ronaldo and Messi have scored more goals. End of. Now, don't come back with me while he's only played in France, because I know you won't do that against Paris Saint-Germain anyway. 200 goals for PSG. He had an incredible record for Napoli. 129 games in Serie A, 96 goals in a league where you don't get many chances. His stats are there. He will score goals if Manchester United play in an offensive manner, in creating chances. This fella, with his movement off the ball, when you watch him live, will add something they haven't already got. And I was talking to Diego Forlan. Do you remember that Uruguayan who burst onto the scene at Manchester United? He is delighted. He says he's an absolute machine. The age with Edinson Cavani is just a number. He's got a point to prove. He hasn't kicked the ball since March. He hopes and thinks it'll be a breath of fresh air into that Manchester United dressing room. And let's be honest, at the moment, that's exactly what that United dressing room need, Greg.
Got a ton of respect for Cavani. He's had a fantastic career. But I've got questions back to you. Whose place does he take? He clearly isn't taking Rashford's place. He's probably not taking Martial's place. So that means a lot less of Mason Greenwood. That's not a great day for Greenwood to hear about that signing in particular. He might get it if it's Jadon Sancho they're bringing in.
I disagree. I think it's a very good day for Mason Greenwood, and I'll tell you why. Not so much in terms of on the pitch, and he will play games with Edison Cavani. He'd probably play in the Martial role, to answer your question, and Martial might have a rest. But for somebody like Mason Greenwood, who's still a teenager, who's burst onto the scene, to see how this guy conducts himself, how he trains, how he looks after himself, how he rests and recovers, what he eats, what he's like around the dressing room. He's got one of those presences that when he walks in, he'll lift the other players. Mason Greenwood will have probably played on the PlayStation and tried to be Edison Cavani. Now, all of a sudden, day in, day out, he's training with him, he's playing with him, he's sharing a dressing room and a coach with him. He'd be pinching himself to think that somebody of that stature has come in. He can only learn off Cavani and only get better. That cannot be a negative to a young boy of that potential.
Well, and he has to come in that motivated. He has to come in with that sort of presence and that leadership. That's the kind of presence that Zlatan did bring. Do we have a healthy Cavani? I mean, that's the big issue. He's obviously had injuries the last 2 years. I know France's season got cut short because of COVID, but he'd only played 14 of 27 league matches. So that's a big thing for me, is seeing him. And I'll tell you what as well, Steve, it has to motivate the midfield more. They need a lot better play, Man United does, in the midfield. We talked about Pogba last week. We can reference Fernandes. Your guy, Van de Beek, we need to see him more. Ole's got to get him on the pitch a lot more. There's no reason. He should be ready. You can't wait anymore. Cavani's coming into a lot of unsettled territory, and he's going to have to be the pro's pro to make it work. I'm sure I'm not the only person, and Man United fans are there that are a little skeptical, but if it works and if it clicks, it should make everybody on the pitch better. The question is, can he be healthy enough to do it?
It's fascinating. Manchester United's next game is a very important one. Away at Newcastle at St James's Park. Like the rest of them, you will catch them all on DAZN. Next up on Shootout, we've another quick-fire round for you. And this week, Greg, we are joined by a proper legend. 11 Premier League titles. Yes, 11 Premier League titles in his career. Taking the questions on Shootout, a Manchester United legend, Paul Scholes.
Favourite goal?
My favourite goal, a couple to choose from. Probably Aston Villa was the most difficult. Volley from into the box, yep.
Best ever moment on the pitch?
Scoring the winner against Man City in the 3rd minute of injury time.
Best teammate?
Best teammate? Too many to choose from. The best player was Ryan Giggs.
Toughest opponent?
Patrick Vieira. Could do everything a centre midfielder is required to do. He could defend, he could attack, control play. Awkward to play against, big long levers, could never get past him. Really good player in that great Arsenal team.
Where and when was your debut and what do you remember about it?
League debut was Ipswich away. I actually came on as sub and scored and we got beat 3-2.
Favourite Premier League title?
They're all my favourite, but probably the first one's probably the most special.
Some great answers there from Paul Scholes, Greg. I love the fact is typically his hardest opponent was Patrick Vieira. Just evoke memories of those great Man United Arsenal battles in the Premier League era.
Not a surprise, and that was the big thing. Those were, physical games. They were sometimes violent games with so much skill intermixed in, and you knew who the parties were. You knew who Man United was going to start year in, year out. They had such a core there, especially the midfielders, which Scholes was part of with Keane and Beckham, that they kept those players together. Same thing with Arsenal: Thierry Henry, Dennis Bergkamp, Patrick Vieira. David Seaman. You knew who would be there, match in, match out. Something we've lost a little bit with that Arsenal-Man United rivalry, but it's great to remember how incredible it was for all those years.
Absolutely. Great guest to have on Shootout. More quick-fire round questions coming to another guest in the next few weeks. And Greg and I will be back with another Shootout very soon.